Every single one of us have experienced trauma. Trauma is not what happened to you, but is the result of what's happening inside of you as a result of what happened to you. So trauma is the residue, the vibration, the contraction of undigested, unfelt, unprocessed events, experiences, memories, events, and occurrences that have happened. And yet we store them in our physiology. Now, when we look back at our developmental phases of life, from when we were very, very young, sometimes even prenatal, all the way to where we are today, there have been events that have occurred. And some of those events landed and really opened us, and we felt safe. And in other times, we in fact felt disconnected and unsafe and either violated, where something happens to you that shouldn't have happened to you, or neglected, which is where something didn't happen to you that should have happened to you. The reason this is important is because nearly all trauma is relational. Therefore, something didn't just happen. It happened because of someone else in your space, not always attuning to you. And so you're going to hear this word a lot this weekend. It's around attunement. And it's one of the core fundamentals of what Hard IQ brings to you, which is an imprint of healthy attunement. This is very different to love. You were probably, in many moments, loved, but you may not have been attuned to. So attunement is the heart-open presence of a caregiver that's unwavering and unfaltering and unconditionally loving and accepting in that moment. But that person who is attuning to you is regulated and connected to self and able to offer deep, heartfelt presence to you. Now, I'm just curious, as you look back to your life, to your own attunement, how many of you would you say had caregivers, not placing any fault here, that deeply were present and attuning, even though they may have been very, very loving? How many of you felt like you received that? Yeah, a few in moments. So we can see there's a little, but when we look at it as a pandemic, there is a culture that we have been brought up in where we haven't always experienced consistent attunement. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to actual things that have happened to us that have created trauma, the trauma is never created by what happened. It's always created by the lack of corrective experience after it happened. So what I mean by that is, I'll give you a simple example. When many of you have heard the story of when I was young, around 15 years old, and I got attacked outside of a nightclub with my best friend. And that would fall into the category of violation, right? So this is my friend and I, we get ambushed by a group of, say, 14 guys, and we're now in the thick of it. I happen to be able to get out and watch it, and I freeze. So I now connect to a paralysis inside of me. I'm unable to take action. I want to save him. I want to do something to protect my brother, but I can't. Literally, my whole physiology freezes. He, on the other hand, is literally having the shit kicked out of him, and he's on the ground, and they're just kicking him in the head over and over again. Now, his nervous system is doing something really appropriate. It's completely shutting down. When I talk to him, he doesn't remember anything. He just went into like a feigning death mode, and his whole nervous system didn't even receive the event. A couple of weeks later, when all of his bruises were healed, he actually wasn't that traumatized. He was just out there drinking, having normal nights out. I, on the other hand, was having panic attacks, anxiety issues, freaking out, overdosing on my asthma medication, and being a complete mess for years. Distrust of men, brotherhood, you name it. So interesting, isn't it? The same event where he had the most vicious attack, he ended up having a level of trauma that was very different to what I experienced. Because I saw it. I had the pictures ingrained in my mind. I saw a disconnected presence in these men that will never leave me. I got an imprint of something that will forever be part of who I am. And I had no one to go to. Nobody really understood. So it wasn't just the fact that it happened. It's that in the weeks and months after, there was no place for me to go to talk about what happened. I was left alone in my own experience. And it's the lack of community, the lack of connection, the lack of being met in that, being heard, felt, seen, tuned into, understood, that created the contraction. So if you think back to the moments where maybe you've had incidences when you were young, when you had either something happen that shouldn't have happened, or something that you should have happened but didn't, just feel into like, who did you have to go to in those moments? And did you have somebody? Were you in a space where you could fully feel safe to bring your deepest truth in your heart and be felt? And most of us weren't. And so therefore the traumas that we experience are ingrained because we don't just experience something that isn't pleasant. It's the fact that we don't have a way to correct it over time. We didn't get that corrective love and attunement and meeting point and holding. And this is why I'm bringing this in so early right now as the first part of our experience together. It might occur a bit heavy. And yet it's so essential that we start here, because the beautiful blessing of Heart IQ is that we become, for each other, the attuning presence, community, tribe, and other that can actually do the healing that we never had a chance to do when we were younger. And so one of the core practices that we do for one another is that we realize that if all of our wounding happened in relationship to other, it's going to require other to heal it. And where a lot of people make a mistake is that they see romantic or primary partnership or relationship as the source of that relational healing and meeting point. And it is a very powerful place. It's a sacred temple for there to be healing and for there to be deep understanding and for you to meet parts of you that would normally be buried, and they come up in relationship. And yet there are certain needs that every single one of you has that can't be met just by yourself through self-soothing or self-regulation, and can't even be met relationally one-to-one with a romantic partner in co-regulation. There is a tribal love that comes through the attunement of our larger family, the larger presence of something bigger. And this is something that used to be in our culture thousands and thousands of years ago, but we've lost touch with it because we are now in a culture of separation. We're separated from ourselves, we're separated from one another, from nature to our larger communities and tribes. We're even disconnected from our own goodness. And what makes it tragic is that not only are we disconnected and separate, we've disconnected from our disconnect. In other words, we also live in a culture where we make it okay and normal to numb from how separate we feel and actually are. And so we're not actually always in touch with our loneliness, with the parts of us that yearn to be felt and met. We're not in touch with our pain. And therefore, we've developed some beautiful strategies to cover that. So the beautiful thing about this weekend and what we're doing here together is that we can actually begin to learn the ways in which we can show up for one another and offer that healthy attunement, that presence, that love, that space for us to come home, relax, and be held and met in parts of us that we wouldn't normally get to be met in outside of an environment like this, and do it joyfully and do it safely. I'm sharing this so that you can become aware that there is trauma, and it's also our gold. It's also the parts of us that can be a portal to accessing some of the most sublime, beautiful parts of who we are, and it can help us open to more of life. In other words, trauma, unchecked, contracts, closes us down, and causes us to avoid life. But trauma in connection is an absolute service to you and to everyone whose life you touch. We're working with what we call the open systems. And the open systems is, imagine this. Imagine that you don't need, in any given moment, to dig for your issues, to look for your stuff, to find things to work on or process. That all you need to do is regulate, relax, and find that point of safety where your heart naturally opens. And as your heart opens and your system regulates, all the stuff that you need to meet will come and find you. In other words, there's an intelligence to all of what's happening inside of you, including the parts of you that need to be felt. And if you're not feeling safe, or you're under tension, or you're unregulated, so you're too stimulated, these parts will just wait. And they'll just be there going, one day he'll relax. I'll find my moment. One day when he takes a breath, things slow down, or when he goes to that really cool retreat, the hard IQ experience. When his guard drops and he has no idea what's coming. This has an intelligence all of his or her own. And when an opening occurs, because the system is safe and feeling open, suddenly all the parts that we normally would have to hunt for, look for, search for, emerge. So here's the thing. Don't look for your stuff. Just focus on what you need to open, and your stuff will find you. Agreed? And that's the beauty of what we're practicing here, is the opportunity to focus on opening rather than trying to heal your past. The healing is automatic. It's already happened. It's already started. The process has occurred. There's nothing you need to do here. There's just to relax, open, and enjoy. And then surrender to what comes up and emerges.